Hi again. Today we are having conversation on sports law, and for this we have with us Jahnavi Upadhyay, partner North India Legal Decathlon, and Vinay Joy, partner of Khaitan and Company. Welcome on board, guys. Thank you for taking time for us today. Let us briefly understand the legislations around the sports in India. So, Janvi, if you could share your insights on that.
So if we talk about India and sports laws, particularly in India, we do not have any state and national legislations for regulating sports in India. However, sports are registered in the state list of 7th schedule of constitution, and Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports issues notifications and guidelines from time to time to national sport federations to act upon and to regulate them. Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports was set up by Government of India in 1982, somewhere around while Asian Games were happening, to create infrastructure and to promote capacity building of broad leasing sports and achieving excellence in various competitive events at national and international levels. Uh, Sports promotion primarily is responsibility of various national sports federations, which are in short called as NFS, which are autonomous in nature, basically. These organizations are responsible for entire sports management, event, and broadcasting. Broadly, when we talk about the laws which govern and regulate sports in India, or authorities rather, we would talk about Sports Authority of India, National Sports Policy, Sports Law and Welfare Association of India, and Sports Broadcasting Law in India.
Thanks, Janvi. I think just from my viewpoint as a practitioner or someone who sort of does deal with it on a day-to-day level sometimes, I think what I practically find is that a lot of these laws that Janvi gave you an update on were really to talk about setting out the framework. But the actual laws that apply are more in the nature of regulations framed by the various bodies, that regulate a particular tournament or a sport. So, for example, if we take up the case of football in India, you have of course, FIFA is the international body that has laid down all the rules in relation to the sport in general. But you have the All India Football Federation, which then lays out its own code of ethics, its own disciplinary code, its regulations for the status of new players and for the transfer of players, all of that. So that is what really applies with respect to the sporting leagues that we have, say the ISL. Um, on the cricketing front, for example, again you have the MCC laws of cricket, which govern the game as such. But then you rely on both the ICC and the BCCI's regulations that are framed. And of course, for something like the IPL, you would have, the IPL, the tournament has its own regulations. They have their own code of conduct. So those are actually the sort of the framework of the rules that really apply on a more day-to-day level.
What are the issues that have arisen when it comes to sports in India?
Issues that we saw on the grassroots level were that sports activities were not permitted, the sport events were cancelled, not only in India, but at a global level for that matter. Sports retail suffered a setback as well. However, within a matter of few days, we saw this change, and everybody adapted to online sports, and suddenly there was online sales which were booming of sports because people suddenly realized the importance of health, and they started to practice sports more during the pandemic, and people really adapted. You saw that human nature of adaptation really kick in at that point in time, and companies shifted their business model to online sales. I think it changed overnight.
I think even from my perspective, what I found was, for example, of course, it's had a wide impact on sports across the globe, and it was no different in India as well. So, as Jambi mentioned, there were cancellations of, sporting leagues. The IPL, while not sort of formally suspending the season, simply said that the season was suspended till further notice. The ISL or the Football League, on the other hand, said that the new season would be held now from November to March. This is usually sometimes held between September and March. And of course, the I League, the last few games of the I League also need to be cancelled. Now, the impact that this has had on the ground, of course, is both on the clubs and on the players. There is, of course, a loss of ticketing revenues that the clubs sort of face. Clubs have to sort of look at cutting down on costs as a result, and then that impacts players as well. So there have been a lot of negotiations between clubs and players with respect to payment of salaries and wages. Also, in terms of sponsorships, for example, on the IPL front, a lot of sponsors gave up money for the tournament. And since the tournament has not now taken place, some of them were looking to sort of get a refund on the money that they have given, or sort of wanted to roll it over to as and when the tournament next takes place. So that again caused a lot of issues from a contractual standpoint, because all of these sponsorship contracts or player contracts are backed by basic contracts in themselves, and the terms of those needed to be looked into. And so that is something that we saw a major rise of during this COVID period.
What steps are actually taken to mitigate the impact and also the disputes that have arisen because of it?
So unfortunately, again, I think because of the lack of a basic administrator or a body to which disputes could be referred to readily in this regard, it's of course taken each of those disputes in each of these leagues has to be viewed separately, and it goes to a different body. So to that extent, I think what ended up happening was, at least with respect to players in the ISL, the technical committee of the IFF did hold that the salaries of players should be paid on time. Unfortunately, with respect to clubs, it does, of course, I think what gets missed out always is how they are meant to sort of cater to paying of those wages on a day-to-day basis when they are not able to sort of source in revenues. But the fact is, I think prudently what needs to be done is going forward. I would think that a corpus does need to be created by the bodies running these various tournaments to provide for contingencies of this nature. And I think there have been talks of setting up, say, smaller funds to provide for retired players, or to sort of give them support in the nature of work or wages during times like this. I think there have been sort of proposals mooted for doing that. But I think it's been each sport taking that up on its own. I wouldn't say I have come across any specific scheme rolled out by the government with respect to sports in particular, trying to look out after their interests.
Initially, there were conversations and talks between the parties, and I'm talking more from the contractual side of supply of goods, or maybe some execution that was to be done. People understood that these are hard times and these are unprecedented times. So in general, organizations, how I saw it to happen in the market, since there were actually, as Vinay said, no scheme, nothing from the government which was rolled out. I think people took the matter in their hands, and they understood the other party's difficulties, and they resolved the issues by either delaying the payments wherein the recovery was to be done, or probably helping the counterpart with providing early payments or a part payment. And this is how it has been moving since then. So people realize probably somewhere that solidarity is the only way right now that they can mitigate disputes.
With this lockdown, there's another new trend that has really come up, and esports has gained a lot of attention. How does it affect the traditional sports in India?
You're absolutely right. I think there's this COVID period with people sitting at home. It's really led to a boom in esports, or fantasy sports, as you might call, as a lot of people do call them. I think in terms of course, from the legal side, honestly, the last couple of years, we've had a lot of debate about whether, a portal such as Dream 11, which run one of the most popular cricketing, apps. Now, whether their game, is amounts to a game of skill or a game of chance, and therefore can be construed as being gambling or not. And there's been some case law around it. Thankfully, some of our high courts have held, in favor of this being construed as a game of skill, because it's not simply about picking any random players and trying to sort of make a team go. You have to sort of look into some more details about, their current form, what they've been up to, and how sort of they gel together with their others. So I think we will, of course, going forward, to my mind, we will see a lot more portals like this, which will sort of come up and which will be quite popular as well. However, in terms of traditional sports, I think the appeal of traditional sports, to my mind, would still hold sway. I think, it's to my mind, a lot of this, even something like a Dream 11 would really look towards something like an IPL to sort of keep the tournament going, because a lot of their, formats are really associated around tournaments like that. So I think people also tend to do both of them together rather than simply try and move
Yeah.
completely towards from one to the other. So I think traditional sports are something that will always appeal to, at least the youth of this nation. And to my mind, I think, they will always be more popular. And I'm sure Janvi will agree to that as well.
Absolutely, Vinay, I would agree to that because traditional sports are definitely about your own physical health and well-being, and practicing something which is there, which is keeping you healthy. And when it comes to esports, I see them a lot as a skill practice, which can probably be implemented eventually with the actual sport on the ground. So I see that they go hand in hand, absolutely. But physical sports appeal would definitely, it is very difficult to let go of it.
How do you see things going in the sports sector in the country?
I think we have seen a lot of the international leagues sort of get back to playing sports. So whether it's cricket, which is resumed, a couple of days ago, you have all the major football leagues in Europe sort of come back and start their games. So I would think that yes, at this time, the major loss to clubs would be the ticketing revenue, of course. But I think the broadcasting and TV rights is something that they will still earn revenues out of. And I think that is something that they will look to maximize going forward. I would think that this is a temporary blip in the larger scheme of things. Of course, I think what matters is during this blip whether a lot of clubs will survive the financial impact that this disruption will have on them. I think that's really the point that needs to be sort of looked at. I think it will also lead to some revision in, for example, player salaries with respect to maybe even in some of the, in IPL or in any of these footballing leagues, the transfer fees payable for players. To my mind, some of that might come down to reflect the new economic reality. We can only hope that all of it does get back to normal.
I see that people are realizing the importance of fitness and the sports in general, and they are practicing more and more now. People have a bit of time on hand since things have moved online, and they are spending more time with families. So when we talk about sports, it's just not the leagues, but what you're doing on the grassroots level as well. There are smaller associations, and as an organization, we support the smaller organizations to promote sports in the communities. So when we talk at the community level, I am seeing that there is a boom in sports, and people are realizing that they can practice more and more sports even at the comfort of their homes. Because today there are so many sports which you can play in your society as well. You don't need to really step out and expose yourself. So yes, and people have picked up cycling. People have picked up badmintons, and there are in-house equipments which are being sold. So I see that we always, as humans, have a way of finding our way around the difficulty, rather than just conceding into the difficulty. So yeah, I think the future is bright for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, Vinay. Thank you, Janvi. This conversation was very interesting.